Okay, we'll call the meeting to order, August 1st meeting of the Planning Commission to order. We'll begin with the pledge to the flag, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Jess, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Varga.
Here.
Mr. Cicero. Absent. Mr. Cook.
Here.
Mr. Perkovic.
Here.
Mr. Sidoti.
Here.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Here.
Mr. Snow.
Here. I entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes of the July 11th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Jess, when you're ready.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. We have one public hearing this evening. The format we follow for public hearings is we allow the applicant an opportunity to tell us what they want to do at a particular location. Then those wishing to speak in favor are afforded an opportunity. Then those wishing to speak against or have questions are given a similar opportunity. So with that in mind, the first item on the agenda tonight is a conditional use permit to allow a pet shop grooming at 7315 Menor Avenue, Pet Supplies Plus. Is that applicant here? Yes. Would you come forward and give us a quick overview of what you'd like to do at that location?
Good evening. My name is Joe Hockendorner. I work for Pet Supplies Plus. We are proposing to renovate the existing store to provide a public pet wash and grooming salon. Hopefully within the packets, we provided 8.5 by 11 presentation of what we're looking to do. So I'll just go through that here quickly and then can address any questions that anyone may have. The first 2 pages are just general information about Pet Supplies Plus. I won't really get into that. That's more about the company. Starting on page 3, the existing store is located at Point East Shopping Center. We're at the corner of Reynolds Road and Mentor Avenue. The address is 7315 Mentor Avenue. Page 4 of the presentation shows our location within the development, sort of located within the elbow. We're between the tile shop and Old Navy. The page 5 just shows the existing storefront of the store, the way it sits now. The store opened in 1998, so we've been there for roughly about 21 years. And the store itself is around 11,000 square feet. Page 6 shows the existing store as well as the proposed renovation area. Within that zone, again, we're looking to provide the pet wash and grooming. The existing store itself is just a standard retail pet store. We carry assortment of natural dog foods, hard goods, toys, treats, grooming products, things like that. We also carry fish and small animals within the store. The store hours are Monday through Saturday, 9 to 9, and Sunday, 10 to 6. The first piece is the self-service pet wash. So if you go to page 7, this will give you an indication of what the proposed layout would be for both of the public pet wash as well as the grooming salon. The public pet wash is comprised of 3 bathing tubs. There's 2 long, low tubs at each end of the pet wash, as well as a small, high middle tub in the middle. So it's basically set up for large dogs at the end that are lower, that are easier to wash, with smaller dogs that can be easily lifted up into the middle tub. On page 8 of the packet, you'll see a typical pet wash and what it looks like. The last component to this proposed renovation would be the grooming salon. The grooming salon composed of 2 components, which is the salon itself as well as a holding and bathing room. The salon would have 2 grooming tables, and the holding bathing room would have its own pet wash tub, as well as holding cages and a washer and dryer. So typically the way it works for the grooming salon is when the pet is brought in, it's first brought in to be bathed, dried, and then it'll go into the grooming salon for styling. The pet wash itself accounts for about 2% of the overall store square footage, with the grooming salon roughly 5%. The grooming, we would start off with 1 to 2 groomers. And again, depending on the business, that would fluctuate, hopefully would go up. The hours for the public pet wash are the same as the store, so every time, the store is open, people can use the pet wash, and the grooming would be similar. The only difference with grooming is we do allow our neighbors, who we call our customers neighbors, to have drop-offs at 8 o'clock in the morning. And then, again, the remaining area of the store would still remain retail, which accounts for 81% of the store, with the remaining 12% as services, which would be office, back rooms, toilet room, like that. If approved, we would like to start this as soon as possible. We would like to have the store or the grooming renovation piece open end of September or October-ish. Again, we appreciate your time this evening. If there are any questions, we'd be happy to address them.
Okay, we'll get to the questions in a moment. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of this applicant? Anyone wishing to speak against? Okay, we'll close the public portion. Any comments from the administration?
No, Mr. Chairman, we have no concerns or objections to Clean Pets.
Good. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? Come back up to the podium. I just have one question. When you said the neighbors, which you refer to as your customers, right? Can I groom my own dog, or am I going to use your guys?
Well, the groomers are our own people, but if you're going to bring your dog in to bathe, it's self-service, so
Okay.
the neighbors do their own bathing.
I was just curious. Okay, Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve, subject to no conditions.
Second.
Just when you're ready.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Under old business, miscellaneous review to reduce the required parking at 6316 Center Street. I think we're going to dismiss that, is that correct?
Yes, following the request to table, the staff met with the applicants, actually this Monday, and they have decided to go with the carry-out route, which does not require reduced parking request, so.
So we need to take it off the table, and then we'll get to the dismissal.
Yes.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to take it off the table.
So moved. Second.
Jess, when you're ready.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. And then we're going to dismiss this, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I entertain a motion.
Motion to dismiss item number 2 without prejudice.
Second.
When you're ready, Jess.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. Okay. Am I correct that they do not have to come before us again? Is that correct? Until such
No, I'm-
time as they may want to adjust the parking?
Correct.
Okay. Under new business, informal rezoning of 8.126 acres from R2 single-family residential to RBG Village Green.
Good evening, Greg Summers with 3941 Erie Street LLC. Here this evening to discuss a new 20-lot RVG community. And I want to go through a few points. We reviewed the staff report in depth and pretty much agree with everything that the staff is recommending. And this site has some challenges. It's not that wide. And we feel that RVG is a good application here with the site limitations. For an 8-acre site, we have a lot of open space that's functional, usable. Like I said, we're pretty much in agreement with everything that's being recommended and would like to open it up to questions or comments.
I have a question. Generally, when we have these types of situations, I ask the applicant, how come you can't develop it as R2 or R4? In this case, it's R2, but
So, in review with the administration, they analyzed the adjoining neighborhoods, and it was actually almost the exact same width of the site, which makes it, it would create many challenges and constraints for the building and design and construction with how narrow the site is. So that's the main reason.
So you're saying you can't do it as R2, but we can do it as Village Green? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, because the setbacks, as outlined in the staff report, they become a major challenge if we were to try to conform with R2. Many of the lots in the adjoining neighborhoods don't conform with R2 because of the same challenges.
Okay.
Now, it wasn't wide enough at the 60-foot right-of-way.
Okay. I'm going to ask, any comments from the administration?
Well, just to elaborate on that a little bit, and for the benefit of everyone here. So the Mender Groveland subdivision, which is Brooks Boulevard, was platted in 1926. The original lot sizes were 50 feet wide by 150 feet deep, or approximately 7,500 square feet. Some of those lots were adjusted and combined over the years. However, very few do actually conform to the R2 district. Likewise, on the other side, the Chase Drive Estates, in which that is the development that Mr. Summers just referred to, it nearly duplicates the width of the project area with the former Rice Elementary School at about just over 300 feet wide. Typical lot sizes. That was platted in 1956, and then the lots were later constructed between 1968 and 1972. Typical lot sizes are 95 feet wide with a depth of 121 to 125 feet, equaling anywhere from 11,500 to 11,875 square feet, which again does not meet the minimum square foot requirement in the R2 district of 15,000 square feet. So I think with the challenges presented in order to do a development to comply with the R2 zoning with a standard 60-foot right-of-way, you're going to have a lot of challenges and create a lot of non-conforming lots unless you have just a sweeping amount of variances that are applied to those lots. So that's, one of the things that I think, at least in the administration's mind, where the RVG option becomes a nice alternative because of the flexibility it provides.
Commissioners, questions for the applicant or the administration?
I have a question for the administration. And just kind of in summarizing what you just said, though, is that basically it would be almost impossible to do an R2 in this property. There'd be so many other non-conforming issues
Right.
that it wouldn't be a standard subdivision.
Correct.
So this is a reasonable application of RVG
Correct.
for that reason.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead. Mr. Cook.
I'm kind of on board with Mr. Snow is why can't we do an R2? And I looked at it the same way. 300-foot width, 60-foot right-of-way, gives you 240 feet, 120-foot depth lots. You only have a 20-foot building spot from your 50-foot setbacks on the front and back. But then I look at the RVG, and some of the setbacks are 8.43 feet back. And by the time we move this cul-de-sac back to 600 feet and peel away 4 or 5 properties, you're going to be down to 15, 16 lots. And if we just relax the front setback to 35 or 40 feet, that gives you a 35 or 30-foot building pad. And by my math, I think you can get 12 lots on it, even with that retention pond. And if you can work with the city to somehow piggyback that retention pond that they built on the south end, man, I think you could get up to 15 R2 lots at 125 feet width, 120 deep, at a 15,000 square foot lot that conforms to the R2 zoning.
Along those lines, you mentioned the cul-de-sac. The administration's recommending that we eliminate the cul-de-sac and just connect to Rice Drive. And we're going to eliminate the green space behind the existing lots as shown because they don't want to see strips of unusable green space. So by the time we interconnect, we add the additional depth, we're going to be able to increase those impractical setbacks that are pretty limited, like with the shortened driveways and such. And you know, I think that it's going to be a really nice asset to have the usable green space in the rear too. I mean, when you drive down the street, you won't see houses. I mean, you'll see right into more green space. The new community can use that. And again, the flexibility, it's really a tight site. It allows us, you know, we've been here before and we've done other communities. And I appreciate your points when we have some more flexibility going along traditional zoning, but this site's going to be tough. And with those other factors said, I mean, you know, we're on an 8-acre site, we're still going to end up with like 35% green space, which I think's and usable, legitimately usable green space. Even along the main roadway there. I mean, if you have, we'll have houses right along the roadway at minimum setback. You'll see sides of house right off Lakeshore. That's another reason. I think it'll look a lot nicer to have some mounding, landscaping signage than having house sides right along Lakeshore. You know, if you add up all those factors, I mean, I genuinely think that it's a good application of RVG. You know, with those factors said, we looked at every angle, and we actually, I looked at it too, with traditional R2, and it's almost impossible to make it work with all those factors said. And I think practically, it is going to be a nicer community with RVG, with all those things.
I
being
still
said.
have it connecting to Rice Drive. I mean, I drew it up, you know, to scale, you know, and I still would like to see an R2 before we dive into all of this, but
Can I ask Kathy too? So there'd be variances required even if we tried to design under the R2 spec you just said?
Well, again, if you're going to mimic what is, like, say, adjacent, those lots were actually pre the zoning, and then the R2 was applied later. So, in order to conform to the R2, I mean, that's a general comment. Again, not having a layout, I understand that Mr. Cook provided, did a sketch out. You could have extremely wide lots. But then again, you still have constraints. You have constraints later on with additions, decks, porches, those kind of things, that people may not necessarily need initially, but they're going to want over time. We see it over and over. So the variances might not necessarily, in the scenario provided, be as prevalent initially if you do the lots wide enough. But I think, again, you have to consider about the long-term effects of allowing for a development like that with buildability restrictions that are unforeseen at this time.
Mr. Summers, would it benefit you to see the sketch that Mr. Cook has developed?
Yeah, and again, that's why I'm here tonight, to discuss this with you guys and look at every option.
I mean, it's just chicken scratch, so it's not an AutoCAD.
No, I understand. I
appreciate your comment.
One is with a retention basin and one is without.
Is it possible to deed restrict these properties so that you can't build a deck or you can't build a shed? I mean, is that a feasible thing to consider?
We see it in certain developments that certainly, which we would not regulate the deed restrictions, but.
Joe, could we do one sweeping setback requirement that?
No, that would have to, well, no. Obviously with an RVG, that's pursuant to development plan under R2, minimum standards are set in the code, and those are black and white standards. The Board of Zoning Appeals really can't issue sort of blanket whole subdivision variances. Their decision-making has to be on a case-by-case basis, and practical difficulties have to be presented. So that would that'd be a significant change in their authority. I think that perhaps what's under discussion is, moving forward, is that minimum 50-foot setback in an R2 still good policy or not? So that may be a discussion point moving forward, because if the front setback is really the only thing that means that this can't be developed as an R2 with conforming lot sizes and conforming rear yard setbacks and you could still maybe get that sort of feel that apparently the developer is looking for via a modified front setback for the R2. Again, that's a discussion that certainly can be had. It's a relatively simple code change, although as a policy question, I have to recognize it's significant.
Okay. Question?
Mr. Chairman, so though the plan has a cul-de-sac, we're thinking in the future that you're going to connect to Rice Street.
That's what the administration recommended.
That's the recommendation, and I would stand behind that recommendation. I have some additional questions that I just want to ask. I can see you've been listening to some of our other reviews of other projects, RVG projects. You've got some facilities in this plan, covered picnic tables, a gazebo. You've got some walking areas. You've got a lake feature. Let me ask, and though you have the mailboxes down there, one of the things I would want is extend that pull-off parking. Well, you're going to have to redesign it because it may or may not be like a cul-de-sac with the intersecting road. But what I would like to see as part of the conceptual development, some place for someone to park to be able to use these facilities. For instance, family picnic, you want to go down to the pavilion or whatever, and you're close to the lake shore, you're going to drive down there possibly. Someplace, just park your car along the edge so you can have a picnic and go home, That's one thought. Maybe these little things become more of a pavilion than the little covered picnic tables, something a little more substantial, but that's a point of discussion down the road. It looks real nice on the drawing, this nice blue lake. Is it a lake or is it a retention facility?
I mean, I'll have to look into engineering and see what type of basin, and we'll have to get into engineering and look at the water, stormwater aspects and into design. And is the basin behind us a wet basin? A dry basin?
What?
I think it's dry, right?
Yeah,
Detention,
detention,
not retention.
retention. Well, my point is, it's not going to look like that. And so, if it's going to be dry most of the time, you're walking around an area full of cattails and such, right? So maybe that doesn't have to be as predominant unless it's required to be that big. Or maybe it's looked at as a lake. I don't know. If you're going to focus on it, you're going to make it a benefit or an improvement of the property for the benefit of the residents, it might want to be more permanent than what would be a dry basin. Along the same lines too, whatever that development is at that end, I'd like to see maybe, you're walking around on a path, a conceptual landscaping of that edge area to just soften it, to make it more interesting and to make it more varied. I may have a difference of opinion. I can see how the RVG works in this situation better than many of the other situations, and that if we go to a strict R2, you're going to have a very rigid street, very rigid lots. This allows for a certain amount of movement, an amount of a little more creative arrangement of houses and things like that, so it's not so rigid. It's not so regimented as it might be with an R2. That was one of my thoughts. And this is just a question. There seems to be a green spot area on the east side in the middle that doesn't have a house on it. Is that reserved for some purpose? Is there a reason why that's there, like that?
Not necessarily. It was just part of the initial concept to
Okay.
maximize open space. Again,
Yeah.
I think with, all these factors, the plan's going to drastically change. But,
yeah.
If we have additional area where there's not a house next to the adjoining houses and we can maximize the open space, maybe we can, put some guest parking and landscaping there, utilize it as something functional.
Yeah,
Headlight
I would
mitigation.
say do something with it. Now, I guess that's my point. I'm not going to tell you what to do with it, but do something that would be to the benefit of the subdivision. Even if it's a couple benches, maybe it's a little paved area, maybe it's a part, maybe it has the potential of being a playground or something that, I know there's not that many units, it might not justify a full-blown playground, but maybe it's an amenity that becomes a benefit to the subdivision, and then that works more in my mind of why you go to RVG rather than just a straight R2. Thank you.
Mr. Cook?
I got one more thing. If you go on this property, the backyards of Brooks, and you eyeball this property line, it looks like all the residents on Brooks they're probably 10 to 15 feet within this property, and probably 5 to 10 feet on the Chase Drive side. What's your plan to mitigate this? And you can't just come through with a dozer, and because people have structures across that line, you're gonna have to work with them to, mitigate that.
And we would never, again, we've done other communities in the city. We would never come in and say we're going to doze down
Right.
structure.
I mean, I'm
We've
just-
worked with the neighbors in every circumstance we've ever built. That's obviously an issue. It's been there for a long time. It's school property. We're going to have some interaction and then also discussion with the administration to see what the best solution is there. But that also might tie into why it might be better to be flexible at the RVG, because if there's some kind of use that we allow people to continue to, I need to talk about that with the administration and a solution that is good for everybody. I mean, we want it to work for everybody and know that, people are using that. We're not going to come in and strong arm and that's not how we operate or work.
Just
So
wanted to bring it up because I know it's gonna be an issue.
that's part, and in the original plan, we showed some green space there to try to maintain some flexibility there depending on where that goes. So, with the RVG, and we didn't want to put a strip there because we know you guys don't like that. But the thought process there was, do we want to have a little strip so there's not disputes and, things like that with the existing houses and structures and the new houses? There's maybe some green,
Right.
that was the thought process. So we would have to get with the city, again, every community we've ever built, we sent out letters, met with the neighbors. It'd be the same thing. We're going to have to find a solution that works for everybody and reasonable, that the city's happy with, and, we can all live with, that works the best. I mean, that's our plan for that.
Anything else, fellas?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Sidoti?
So, Mr. Summers, for the record, I brought this up once before on another school property. So for the record, as we move forward, you are planning some discussions and interaction with the residents on Brooks and Chase.
Absolutely. Especially with the existing situation there.
Thank you.
Probably even more so than normal because, like Mr. Cook said, people have structures there and there's, that's going to be necessary for sure. Sooner than later is the plan.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
I
Perkovic?
have a comment. I just want to go on record saying that I do like the RVG request for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is that when you look at the district regulations, the R2 zoning, you could get a maximum of 20 units on this. And the proposal is essentially for the same number of units, but with clustering and kind of, creativity with the road undulating and so forth, number one, you can get the same number of units, but you end up with quite a bit of green space, and which could turn into an amenity. So for that, I really appreciate it. The other thing that could help with discussions we also talked about with the setbacks and so forth, but one of the conditions was that the city was looking for a tree preservation plan, and any of the larger trees hopefully be able to remain. So with the RVG, that gives you a little bit more freedom for that to happen, where you might be able to move around trees and stuff. So for that, I really like this proposal, with, of course, the changes that need to be made. So.
Thank you. I don't think with the RVG plan, I don't think that much clearing, or if any at all, is going to be required. I mean, we've been out on site. I very minimal, if any, clearing. I think everything that's there can stay for the most part.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else, commissioners? Anything else from the administration? Kathy?
I think in the last RVG proposal, we had added a condition to provide an R2 drawing. I debated whether we should put that in as a condition or not, but I guess I throw that out there for consideration since it is an item of interest.
I think it would be prudent to do that. You can do that, right?
show what
Show,
we,
show how it could be developed as R2.
yeah, we're glad to do whatever you guys recommend. Again, I think it's a lot more practical in RVG here, like we just discussed, but I'm glad to show, just so we can compare and show everybody what it would look like both ways, so that, no problem.
Okay, good. So, I'm gonna open it up to the audience. If there's any spokesperson for the group that would like to make a comment or has a question. It's not a public hearing, so we can certainly do that. Okay, it's not the public, but since there's a substantial amount of people here, I thought it might be prudent, if you had a comment you'd like to make, we'll be happy to entertain it. If you go up to the podium,
Thank you for the feedback.
okay. And I need you to identify yourself for the clerk, please.
I'm Sandy Aker. I live on Chase, 6257 Chase Drive. We've actually, Elaine and Eileen Foster, well, lives a few houses down. We've actually contacted a lot of our neighbors. We were very concerned since our property has actually encroached upon the school property for 5 feet on Chase and up to 5 to 15 feet on Brooks Boulevard. So we were aware of it. We were very concerned.
Okay.
We were concerned the fence line was going to be taken down, our structures, sheds, the pools, the garages were going to be moved. We were concerned about all of that. Many people here that financially can't afford it. My husband, myself, my husband has cancer. We pay $1,100 for one medication for 1 month. We just can't afford it.
I think
So-
Mr. Summers agreed to work with you
Okay,
residents.
great, absolutely. So
So-
we're very grateful. I think as a group, we're very grateful.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
Thanks for
Thank
your
you,
comments.
sir, for bringing it up. I really appreciate it. Thank you. I'm not sure if you're allowing other people to see.
Sure.
Sure.
My concern is, I don't know if you've been,
I
You
need,
state your name,
I need
please.
you to identify
Kathy
yourself.
Trinovich.
Address.
Okay, my concern is, I don't know if you've been down on Lost Nation where they got this housing where they're all grouped together, real crammed. Well, that's, if you put 12 houses on an area where, if you go down Chase Drive where there's 7.5 houses, that's what it's gonna look like. It's gonna be houses crammed together. And the other thing is, I've owned the house since 1984, and 2 doors up from me, they could not build, a swimming pool across the street. They couldn't build a basement because of the water tables too high. So if they're planning on putting basements in here, that's not going to work, most likely. But I mean, cramming 12 houses on the one side on Chase there, where there'd be an area from 7.5 houses, that's kind of crammed together, and I don't believe it would look very well. Good.
We need your address, ma'am. Your address?
6293 Chase Drive.
Thank you.
I'm the retention or detention basin is right behind my house.
Gotcha. Anyone else wishing to comment? Go right ahead.
Hi, David Khalil, 6535 Chase Drive. I'm just wondering if there's any consideration or discussions on how this will impact the traffic on Lakeshore Boulevard. There's certain times of the day, both in the morning and in the afternoon, where it could take 5 to 10 minutes to make left-hand turns off the side streets or from Lakeshore onto side streets. And if a center lane, turning lane would be considered as part of this, because the traffic is terrible at certain times. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else? Okay, we'll close that off to the public portion. Any comments? Mr. Summers, do you have enough information to go on for the next round?
Yes, and like I said, we're gonna work with the neighbors. We're not planning on asking them to move anything or anything. And again, I think when we talk to, we'll address some of the other concerns. I mean, we're not jamming them in necessarily like Lost Nation, but again, I think the RVG actually plays in here. That's gonna allow us to be more flexible with allowing them to use some of that area. Because if we have lots that are under the R2, even in the drawing, I just wanna, is the camera on or?
Yes.
Or, okay. I just want to make this quick point. You're going to have lots that go all the way to the property line where there's already some encroachments, where that's going to complicate things even more and limit that building setback. So I think the RVG and some green space back there is actually going to play into working with the neighbors to, and I don't know how the city is going to want us to coordinate that, but there's a way to do it, to let them continue to use that, whether it be, I don't know what it would even, what the proper, I could ask Mr. Zeman what maybe the proper legal perspective is on letting them use that property, or, you know, we're going to have to get into that, but we're not planning on having people move their things. But again, to address the R2 versus RVG again, I think the flexibility is going to play into that solution as well. So we'll get with these guys and get with the administration and figure out how to solve it.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. No action required, right?
No, and just in response to the one comment, the engineering department, per the code, is requiring a trip generation study.
So that will answer your question. The administration is asking for a trip generation study. Okay. Director's report.
We actually have a few items this evening to talk about.
Do you really?
Oh, no.
You're doing so well. The first item, as you know, the property on Reynolds at Tyler Boulevard, where the new Starbucks is going in, and behind that where the old Bravo restaurant was, you had reviewed architectural renderings for the Bravo restaurant to be converted for a future restaurant and split. So those plans have been coming in, and the architect reached out to us and made a minor change to the plans. And we wanted to make you aware of that, and if you were concerned enough that it needed to come for a revised reimaging review, we could have them come, because they have to come before you anyway for an outdoor dining permit. Or is this minor enough that it suffices?
What's the change?
So I'm going to, Larry was talking directly with the architect, so I'm going to have Larry talk about it.
Okay, the image on the screen right now is what was approved. Okay, and this is what they're looking at doing, which will basically bring the siding all the way down. When they went beyond the design phase, they discovered they weren't going to be able to attach the lap siding directly to the brick like they had hoped to, without causing a building envelope problem.
Could you go back again? Just go back to what was approved.
It's this area here is really what's changing along. It would,
It's also the area on both sides of the door that looks like it's
Correct.
a brown material here, and now it's all going to be siding.
it's gonna be siding all the way down in a couple different areas. This is the section that shows it the best. And it was because of that building envelope issue they had. They looked at a couple different options with it and trying to get the cornice and everything working. What they ended up deciding the best solution to this problem was to put the siding on like a rain screen. And by doing so, it created a 4-inch gap between the bricks and the siding and the windows. And it would even cause, at the corner of Mission Barbecue here, it would leave a sharp metal flashing that could cause issues there.
I understand. Why, were they not adding masonry or stone at the, new stone at the
No.
base? That was existing
It
stone?
was existing.
So that's what they can't come up with. And,
We got a- there's a
the
4-inch.
brown on this scheme was what? What material? Wood? Not to be, too argumentative about it, but I'm just trying to see what we got here, apples to what. It's,
I'm sure it's like a lap siding, hardy blank.
what does it say?
There it is, the darker.
There it is. Anodized aluminum.
Storefront.
I know, I have to, I'm sure my compatriots here want me to say something about this. It's not as nice as what we approved, and it's a lot more.
I think we'll need to see him again.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. And they need to do a rendering in color
The color would
so we
help,
can
right.
see and address the entire elevation. It looks to me like they've removed all that stonework at the bottom, or they're covering it up. And what I would just suggest that you could take back to them as a comment is put new stone at the base of that, or a stone-like material to get the effect that they had before. I understand that they have stone behind there now, but, they need to adjust what their thinking is so that it looks more like what it was before.
Okay.
Like I said, they have to come back, they have to come to you anyway for
Sure.
the outside dining. So that would enable them to,
Do they have a second operator for the other part of the building yet?
they haven't indicated that yet.
No,
to me,
there's nothing
so,
indicated
yeah.
on the plans. It just submitted for the Mission Barbecue
Yeah.
outside patio.
I mean, my reaction to that piece, in the center of the screen, is that right now aside from the awning, there's three different, and aside from the overhang, the cornice, there's three different materials, which that make that elevation more interesting, and they're going to eliminate that down to just one material, and I would like to see something more than that.
Okay.
That would be my reaction.
So we're gonna see them.
Okay.
When are they gonna be back for the outdoor dining?
So they'll be back on the 22nd. They submitted for,
They did.
Yes, they
They did
submitted.
submit, okay. Yep. So we'll just make sure that they submit the architectural reimaging as well.
Okay.
We'll combine it. Second item, just to keep you updated, I know I mentioned some months back about the design awards. We finally had an opportunity to get back out. Some of these projects were kind of in
Old.
Phases?
well, they weren't completely done, so we were giving them time to finish, and also the landscaping was a little bit delayed out for obvious reasons. The rain didn't help. So we've been back out and actually just back this week taking some pictures. So what we're going to do is, if not by the next meeting, then definitely in September, we'll have all of the different businesses for you to choose from, and maybe pick the top 3 from each category, and then we'll do a final award after that
Okay.
with some more detailed descriptions. So it's still in the process and it's still being worked on. I just wouldn't want you to think that we
Think we
forgot
forgot
about it.
about it.
Yeah.
We know you wouldn't do that.
Right. So lastly, it came to my attention today in reviewing, looking ahead, because I'm just so excited for the holidays.
You're talking about Labor Day, right?
No,
Is that Halloween?
so, in looking at the calendar, we kind of came up with a little bit of a dilemma. After the November 14th meeting, of course, we have the Planning Commission deadline on the 15th, and then the next scheduled meeting is to be held on December 5th. We have some conflicts because of the Thanksgiving holiday. The offices are closed the 28th and 29th, and that would normally be when we do packets. And rather than rush it and try and jam everything in the day before Thanksgiving, which again produces less quality of a staff report, we'd like to ask, because you're only required to have one meeting in December anyway, if we could bump that December 5th meeting to the 12th.
Joe, any concerns with that? Okay. You need a motion? Okay. You gonna make the motion?
Make the motion to accept the new proposed calendar?
Second.
Just when you're ready.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes.
Thank you very much. That'll help moving things forward, and that's the only change that we know of at the moment. There is one minor deadline change that we'll have to update because of that. Jess, on the December, on the last line item, the deadline actually will change from December 6th to December 13th, which I missed too, so.
Got it.
But other than that, we're great. Thank you very much.
Do you have any comments relative to your proposal?
No, Mr. Chairman, unless you have some questions.
Okay. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, here we go.